Hey guys, it's Snoo. Today we are returning to a more tech-centric video for you. I'm talking about one of my absolute favorite spirit gems, Charge Infusion, and whether or not this might be really good to add to your build to add a whole bunch of extra player power. I've been using it the entire time. I've been playing Path of Exile 2, both in 0.1 and 0.2, but not until recently have I actually unlocked all three charges that are associated with it, absolutely maximizing the effectiveness of the spirit gem. There's certainly a pretty decent payoff to be had in order to use this, but wow, my oh my, that is a lot of extra power overall. Three major stats of more multiplier effects to those stats involved. So we're going to talk about what this spirit gem is. We're going to dive into it, and I'm going to share with you exactly how I've brought it completely online now for the exact build I'm doing, at least getting a partial impact out of it. And then we'll finish out talking about whether or not this might be good for your build. I'm not just going to talk about all kinds of different builds, but hopefully by the end you'll have a better understanding of if it's something you want to add in the case of what you're doing, because in my opinion, a lot of people, even build creators, are leaving a lot of power on the table by not utilizing this tech. And I think many builds could be improved by adding Charge Infusion to the build. And in case you missed it, here is a freeze frame of that background footage that we were just seeing. You can see the blue, red, and green charges on the buff bar. We have 3 power charges, 3 endurance charges, and 5 frenzy charges. That, in this particular moment, is absolutely max capped charges on all 3. I'm running +2 max frenzy charges because this is a twister build that's using barrage, so I'm actually using frenzy charges in that way. But in this particular moment, irrefutable evidence that the tech is actually working in the build in a real way. Here we are in game, and this is the current build that I'm running. I'm still set up the same way I was doing, seeing as this was the ritual farming setup with CI variant of Twister. And so this will be linked in the description below, the path of building. If you check the profile, the player profile, it may or may not show what you're seeing here. So be sure to click the POB link if you want to see the entire build. I'm not going to go over the build as a whole. We're just going to be laser focused on Charge Infusion and everything, or all the implications around that. So the Charge Infusion buff is here. Keep in mind, this is a level 2120 gem. One of the first gems you would want to level up to 21, as all 3 of those buff effects are increased by 1%, flat 1% per level, or at least at the breakpoint from 20 to 21. Just look at this, the upsides, okay? The upsides, 21% more critical hit chance while you have a power charge. 18% more defenses while you have an endurance charge, that is global defenses. And 13% more skill speed while you have a frenzy charge. My friends, those are 3 of the absolute strongest stat points in the game. Skill speed, global defense, and critical hit. And they're all more multipliers. So ain't nobody gonna argue with the power that this gives, at least on the top end. But it does come with a caveat, or multiple caveats, and those caveats are why not everybody's using this setup automatically. The first caveat is, as you can see, it is a 30 spirit cost spirit gem. It obviously costs the skill slot itself as well. And for the sake of me and the build I'm running, I have 220 spirit. I'm getting all of that from 100 through the campaign, plus almost perfect here on the amulet, as well as the body armor. I have ran it against the darkness with spirit in the past, not currently doing it, but I only have spirit on 2 pieces of gear. Another downside to using this spirit gem, if you will, is the fact that it doesn't last forever. It requires your charges to be removed over a certain period of time, in this case 5.8 seconds, and that's generally speaking kind of a bad thing, although there is a kind of a funky little advantage to it on certain things like this here. 20% increased evasion if you've consumed a frenzy charge recently. You get 50% over here, and then you actually get some pretty powerful options for power charge. So in case you weren't automatically consuming these charges, this does count as consuming charges. The wording here, you can check that, and so even Charge Infusion consumes charges, you get the bonus. Now you're probably already consuming at least one of the charges on the regular, so it may not be that impactful. But the last thing we'll say is the fact that you have to get charges in the first place. So I think that's pretty much 4 caveats to making this work. And that's not even counting the full impact of it, all three, but at least to just get one of the charges working. So you need to acquire charges, and this could get in the way of what you're already doing with spending charges. And so most builds that have charges only acquire one, and so this is going to start peeling off charges that you're trying to accumulate for another spender. But that's basically all the negatives that you might possibly say about using Charge Infusion. Obviously, tremendous power increase, tremendous upside, with some pretty steep stipulations to make it use. Now I'll get into how I'm getting full maximal use out of Charge Infusion. But let's actually begin with Barrage. This doesn't have anything to do with how I'm acquiring Frenzy Charges. This is the spender of choice. Now I have Perpetual Charge connected here, so it's not always a problem, but you will have noticed in the front end of that little background mapping showcase that sometimes Frenzy Charges just got dumped down to 0. That's because I pressed Barrage, and of course I want to acquire Frenzy Charges as fast as I can, but that's just naturally part of the build. I use Barrage, get crazy power for that through Twisters. As far as acquiring the Frenzy Charges, there's actually 3 different things I'm doing to acquire them. One, actually I think we'll start with the most standardized one. It's Combat Frenzy. Now, recently in patch 0.2, Combat Frenzy got nerfed pretty hard by only allowing you to get Frenzy Charge fully qualityed and leveled at 4.1 seconds. Every 4.1 seconds, you can unlock a charge. You need to be electrocuting, pinning, or freezing constantly to do that. I got the freezing thing on lockdown here, and it's very important to be using Profusion in the most reliable place that you're getting charges, and that's because, again, Charge Infusion drains 1 charge every, 5.8 seconds. So if I have the opportunity to get a power charge every 4.1 seconds, if I can get 2, that's a big deal. Obviously, that helps for accumulating extra charges for Barrage, but it's also really important in that sort of in-between times, I don't acquire 1 charge and then it instantly drains, because it's working on kind of a ticking clock system there. I acquire 2 charges, or very likely, to acquire 2 charges, and then I only drain back down to 1, in which case I'm still getting the more skill speed multiplier going on, which matters quite a bit because I'm using Whirling Slash, so that's actually more movement speed in this case. Call of the Week is another big place. I'm getting Frenzy Charges in maps in particular, and this is an addition to the build that came fairly late. I made a video on this, how I got the build to go even faster by also not just moving crazy fast with Whirling Slash through accuracy stacking, but also teleporting whenever I want on demand if I can target the enemy, teleport, and then kill them with the same skill. That's why I got a lot of damage supports in here. Soul Drain's pretty cool to use here. It does cost a little bit of mana, 49. To use that, but this is enabling me to cull enemies and kill them reliably. Don't even have to cull them to reap the benefit of getting a Frenzy Charge this way. And I can stack up Frenzy Charges pretty quickly if I just spam this, as I'm already attacking extremely fast with this build. The last method you can probably guess is Cast on Crit Sniper's Mark. So anyone running a crit-based build, which you probably would if you're using Charge Infusion, you're getting Sniper's Mark in there probably. And so this is very useful on heavy health single target, pinnacle bossing. Not that useful in maps, generally speaking, because you have to be able to hit the enemy at least twice without killing them in order to reap the benefit of the Frenzy Charge. That's why, those of you may not know, when you try to use Sniper's Mark in maps where it's in your meta gem, it might be going off on the skill bar down here, and you might see it turn over with its cooldown, but you never seem to get Frenzy Charge because you're actually killing the enemy instead of peeling off the charge. You have to actually be able to peel the charge off with them still alive on that hit, and that's why you're not getting it. So those are the 3 ways I'm getting Frenzy Charge. Here we have Profane Ritual, and of course this is just a holdover from 0.1 when I was playing Tempest Flurry Monk using Flicker Strike, and the Profane Ritual, I felt, became the de facto most reliable, unbelievably good, reliable way to get power charges in combat, in maps. It still is. Hell, it is even if you're shattering most enemies, which I was then and I still am now. This sucker goes off all the time. You can see it in the showcase, and it is way more reliable by itself than all 3 combined methods to acquire Frenzy Charges, with the exception of single target on bosses, and it doesn't work at all. So, of course, when it comes to single target and bossing, I'm glad that I have Cast on Crit Sniper's Mark. But Cast on Crit or Cast on Freeze or Cast on Shock, or really any of the meta gems with Profane Ritual, extremely reliable. And you will have seen in that showcase that the most reliable charge that I had by far was Power Charge. It just kept on being topped off instantly at 3 charges. I don't even know if it ever went down to 2 charges. Now, this is all tech that I had in place essentially back in 0.1 with the Monk. What is new here today, recently, with the CI variant is these two support gems, Splinter and Break Endurance. All right, now I was using Single Out down here on the last skill slot to break armor, which is very useful as it is effectively an exposure for physical damage, and I'm using a Twister, and even with elemental twisters, about half of my damage is physical anyway, so it's a very good idea to get exposure in the build, but instead of putting it there, I now have it here. So I get Splinter, which break armor equals 15% physical damage dealt, and then 40% chance to gain endurance charge when supported skills fully break armor. You can probably guess this has virtually no impact, single target against Pinnacle Boss, not going to be valuable at all. But on Trash, especially in Delirium maps like the ones I was, where I break the Delirium Mirror, and then, you know, it's just like 10 Trash mobs spawn there. Of course, I'm going to be fully breaking armor unless I'm doing an insane amount of lopsided elemental damage is way overtaking the physical damage, which is probably not going to be the case. Certainly not with Whirling Slash in play. If I'm a little bit too assertive and aggressive with Twisters, this won't be working so well. But if I'm more aggressive with Whirling Slash than, say, Twister, and I'm moving really fast, and the Twisters almost can't keep up with me moving, this is really, really good. Now, I will say, in the case of the build I'm running, it kind of sucks to pull 2 supports out of here. I was using Exposure here, which I obviously don't need to, because I'm putting it in a different place, talking about Cold Exposure, and Unbreakable support's really, really strong here. You can look that one up if you don't know what that is. But the combo Splinter and Break Endurance is really reliable here, and if you can fit it in your ability, like Whirling Slash or Tempest Flurry, then you can absolutely make use of this. Again, it will require a skill gem that's a little bit more dominant on the side of physical damage than elemental, but that's basically the only thing in play. 2 supports, got to be hitting often, got to be doing physical damage. In the case of this build, for CI, that's tremendous value, as I am currently rocking nearly 5,000 energy shield, and that'll go up to nearly 6,000 when that's proccing, and then also I have some evasion too, and just to remind you, global defenses, that's both energy shield and evasion, and I don't have very much evasion, but it makes a big impact really when you have that % more multiplier. So let's just look at it one more time. Again, 21% more crit chance, 18% more defenses, 13% more skill speed. It's obvious why I want all 3 of those. It's a crit-based build. I'm using an Amazon. The % more crit multiplier helps me cap out my crit chance. It's really, really good for Twister, because Twisters either completely crit or they completely don't crit. So if you can actually reach crit cap, like literally crit cap with your Twisters, that's a huge deal. % more skill speed, Whirling Slash, Twister, everything, cast, all of it. It is, in fact, the way I move, so it's a tremendously positive benefit for the build I'm running. And then more defenses, I would say, is the least beneficial of the 3, and it's the reason why I've only included it in this variant. I wouldn't even really bother with it for the life variation of the build. Maybe for the hybrid version, I don't have it in there right now, but at least for this variant, it seems to make sense to do it. I would say it's the least important one and the most questionable one as to whether or not I should bother doing that. So let's now get to the question of whether you should include Charge Infusion in your build or not. The truth is there's no straightforward answer to that. I think it's going to be a judgment call on your part. Remember, the upsides are, as you can see clearly, they only apply to the charges you're getting, and you have to keep in mind that you need to get charges in an extra way. For the sake of me, and I think virtually any build out there, if you're using a meta gem, you can just squeeze 1 slot in here. You don't need impetus or necessarily need inspiration in there. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Probably not, but you can probably fit in 1 skill slot to get Profane Ritual. I think most builds could do that. So any in-game crit build is going to benefit greatly from this. Unless you're already capping crit and you're focused more on, like, you know, pinnacle bossing, and you're getting that crit capped whether you were to have this or not. Probably a really good idea. Endurance charges is a bit more questionable. If you're doing some Warcry stuff, certainly it has more options there. You'll see that you can get endurance charges through Warcry. But this is a really cheeky method, and again requires you to be doing some physical damage fairly reliably. You got to do enough physical damage to actually break armor before you kill an enemy. Talk about trash mobs, so that might be a little questionable. But then, of course, at the end we have the skill speed. All right, so some would argue this is the most important stat, because going faster is everything in a game like this. If you're not using a skill like Whirling Slash or Tempest Flurry to move fast, well, maybe it's going to lose some of its edge in terms of how important it is to get this. But, especially if you are, or if you're using some sort of like stop and go spamming a button, that's really good. Obviously, a lot of you are playing Lightning Spear, and Lightning Spear, especially on a Roa, isn't going to get a huge amount of value out of the % more skill speed. But that is a fairly niche type build, I will say. I'm just bringing it up because it is obviously a real popular one. And if you're doing a conventional Lightning Spear build like that, maybe you leave this out. But for everyone else, if you're making use of skill speed in any sort of major way, if you're making use of crit in any major way, if defenses matter to you a lot, if you're an ES build, which I guess almost everybody is this time around, then Charge Infusion might be of good use for you. I don't think you need to get all 3 charges to make use. I certainly haven't, but probably want 2 out of 3. You probably want to be getting 2 out of 3 in a big way in order to make sense of this. Power charges is kind of a given. The other 2 are a little bit more questionable or harder to justify because they're just harder to get around. And like the power charge one, for example, you can be a power charge spender and still be floating power charges enough to get around this. But again, with the other 2, they got a little bit more thinking needed to figure out whether or not it's worth it. So you be the judge of that. I've answered that question as best I can, but just trying to give you some of the tools and understanding for you to make the judgment call yourself. 30 spirit, a skill slot point, gotta get the charges, whatever you're going for. Probably need 2 out of 3. Probably need to be a crit based build. Have a meta gem like Cast on Crit. And this is especially true if you are a Whirling Slash or Tempest Flurry build. I would say it almost certainly is worth it for you. Well, there you have it. That's it for the video. That is Charge Infusion. All of it. Just about everything that I can say on it. I squeezed it in a short little tech video. If you have any questions, any remaining questions, let me know in the comments section down below. Obviously, there's still a ton of things about that. Idiosyncratic things about what I was talking that were not discussed in this video. Like all kinds of different builds, all kinds of different setups, all kinds of different ways to go about it. But, you know, it's still early access, still a lot to learn. And at the very least, I want you to know that this is something you can do and something that may very well be worth adding to your build. It might be something that, you know, you don't have the spirit to get it right now. Maybe you don't have the skill slot to get it right now. It's the only thing stopping for you. It'll give you something to set a goal for when you realize how much extra power you could have in whatever build you're playing. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one.